In 2014, after years of working for Manpower Group, Kyle Horn established America's Job Honor Awards to help bring employers together with trained and skilled job seekers. The annual Job Honor Awards, which started in Cedar Rapids but have since expanded to Illinois, Wisconsin, and Minnesota, celebrate individuals who have overcome significant barriers, including incarceration, to employment and the employers who hire them, and the many public and private organizations that help people obtain meaningful employment by providing technical and life skills training. Eventually, Mr. Horn plans to expand his program to cover the entire country. And I think that will be a truly awesome day. So please join me in welcoming the founder and director of America's Job Honor Awards, Mr. Kyle Horn.
Thank you, Scott. Appreciate that. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and it's a real pleasure to be with all of you today. It's an honor for me, in fact, to be with you on what is a special day, a day of celebration and a day of reflection. And those days are always important, always meaningful for me. This day, I'm sure it's not lost on you, this moment in time is a very significant one. It's part of a string of other significant times that you've experienced in your lives. Some of them probably feel like they were only yesterday. Driving alone for the first time, graduating high school, opening your first paycheck. For some of you, getting married, seeing your child born. And undoubtedly, some of those moments were as sorrowful as they could possibly be, because you've all lost individuals who meant so much to you, and their absence from your life today is as real as the empty seats in this auditorium. Now, whenever we encounter significant moments like that, we're always inclined toward introspection and reflection. It gives us an opportunity to ask ourselves, do I really have it all figured out? Am I on the right path? But very quickly, those moments of reflection are often cut short by the next shiny object. We throw off those deep philosophical questions and return to living in the real world. But what I would propose to you today, my friends, is that those moments of reflection may have carried you nearer the real world than you had ever been before in your lives. And perhaps passing on beyond that moment was not returning to the real world. Perhaps it was falling asleep again. Well, today we have another such opportunity. Let's not squander it. This is an opportunity for us to reconsider our worldview, to consider whether we do indeed have it all figured out, or whether maybe we need to make some course corrections on the way we view this universe. We all tend to be bullheaded. Once we adopt a particular worldview, we're hell-bent on defending it for the rest of our lives. But you've all recently been through an education program, and if education teaches you anything, it teaches you how to learn. And a critical component of how to learn is how to have the humility and the good sense to recognize when you're wrong about something, and to be able to adjust your opinion based upon the evidence. Now, I know in my own life, when I was the age of many of you, individuals here today, my own preconceptions about life were shattered. But far from a devastating experience, it was one of the most exhilarating experiences of my entire life. I honestly believe there is great good that can come from the discovery that you've been a complete fool about something for your entire life, and I highly recommend it. And it's kind of counterintuitive. We all feel like we have something invested in our old worldview. We want to defend it. Why? Why, especially if it's killing you? So this is an opportunity to reassess. I think it's an honorable thing to look at what you once believed and be willing to consider, man, I was flat wrong about that, wasn't I? Time to try something else. Moments like these, in my view, among their greatest value is it affords an opportunity to do precisely that. All of us grew up in an environment where self-importance, self-focus, self-assertion were all very much encouraged. And the counterbalancing values of restraint, humility, and personal responsibility were receiving far less emphasis. And it has really created a society that's kind of gone down its own road. In fact, a New York professor of psychology referred to the cult of self-worship, and he thought that was an apt description for much of U.S. society. And, what people have found there, by and large, is emptiness. Selfism and materialism promises to bring peace and security and happiness and a sense of accomplishment. And yet, when we look at the evidence, we see that it has never accomplished those things. We've had some high-profile suicides just in the last 3 or 4 weeks. Anthony Bourdain, Kate Spade, individuals who from the outside would appear to be people who had it all. Everything that we all want, loads of money, the adulation of their friends and of a public that was crazy about them. People taking an interest in every detail of their lives. They had it all, and yet they were miserable. And we've seen this play out time and again in society, from Kurt Cobain to Elvis Presley. The fact is, there's nothing that disappoints like finally achieving that thing that you thought would bring you happiness, only to discover that it leaves you wanting. And that spiral is the death spiral of the materialist. And yet we've all been encouraged in that direction, also by an economy that encourages consumerism. So it's very difficult for any of us to grow up and become the type of a human being where we don't instinctively feel that money does in fact buy happiness. And in fact, a lot of us might proclaim on the surface to disregard that. Well, we know money doesn't buy happiness, but deep down inside, is that maybe our operating paradigm? Really difficult to escape that. Well, today is an opportunity to reconsider your view of life. Outside the gates of this prison stretch 2 paths. One path is the path of self-focus, self-absorption, self-obsession. And the other path is a focus on the lives of other individuals. And down one of those paths is bondage and ultimately misery and emptiness, and down the other, peace and fulfillment. You have the power to choose which of those 2 paths that you will walk, and that path will define you or destroy you. And so this is a very good opportunity to consider which of those paths. What things have you tried in your lives up to this point that have not been effective, and what things might you try in the future that could change everything? I think it's really important for individuals who are departing prison to develop a theory of why it happened in your life. Now this is difficult for me. I've blown it like everybody else, and yet I've never been in your shoes. And so therefore I don't know the full ramifications of it, but I've tried very hard to walk in your shoes and to ask myself, man, if I were in their position, what would be the questions going through my mind? And inevitably, I come to, I'd wonder what it all meant. Was this just some painful, arbitrary blight on my life, like a tumor that I'm going to have to carry around as a memory of that pain for the rest of my life? A tragic thing that should have been avoided, but here it is, and now it's going to haunt me forever and diminish my potential as a human being? Or is it going to be something else altogether? Is it going to be something that through the pain of that walk through that furnace has equipped me with a depth of understanding and a depth of empathy that I never could have achieved otherwise? Can God throw a trump card down on that horrible experience and cause something wonderful to arise from it? We've seen examples of that in society. Some great men who did time in prison and came out and made undeniable contributions to the world. Dr. Martin Luther King, Mandela, individuals who did time, came out, changed men, but not changed in terms of being hard or embittered, changed in their outlook. They were less inclined to chase after the next shiny object and more inclined to change the world. And I think that can be viewed as a gift. I honestly, when I speak in front of employers, and I do all the time, and I'm encouraging them to hire individuals like you, one of the things I tell them is, look, if you hire individuals who have overcome significant barriers to employment, like prior criminal convictions or like disability, you're not going to get just an adequate employee. You have the potential here of getting an amazing employee with remarkable work ethic and loyalty, not despite their background, but rather because of it. Because people who have suffered tend not to feel entitled. They know the value of a job. They know the importance of that job in their life, and they tend to do a white-knuckle ride on that job. Basically, it's an opportunity to develop an emotional maturity and some deep roots that most of the rest of us will never lack for never having walked through that fire. Now, of course, there's an alternate potential outcome, and that is you can become embittered. As they say, the same sun that melts the butter hardens the clay. And some people take that approach through hardship. They clench their fists, they grit their teeth, they worship the bitterness, and they come out harder and meaner than they went in. That's one way of dealing with it, but that path leads to destruction. The other way of dealing with this is saying, well, look, it may be a terrible thing that happened here. And indeed, it may be the case that the sentence was utterly disproportionate to the crime. And it may be that you feel that you shouldn't be here at all. But the fact of the matter is, the crime occurred, you were convicted, here you are. Now how can we make the best of this? And you know that you're going to be facing some barricades once you get out of here. The world is not famous for being a forgiving and a redeeming place. But the world is wrong. And there are people in the world who do see things rightly. There are employers out there, such as the ones that you just saw in the video, who recognize that people who have been through hard times carry with them a potential to make a terrific contribution to the workforce. And they want to give those individuals a chance because experience has taught them that they are the best employees they have. They're not going to freak out when the coffee machine breaks down. You know, they've already suffered. They've already been through the hard times. So they make absolutely wonderful employees. And I do want to do just a little bit deeper dive into the job search techniques. It's what I do professionally, and I would be remiss if I didn't share with you some hints for how you can improve your odds when searching for a job. These are some of the examples of individuals whose stories we've captured. Basically, the whole thing started when I was a manager for a staffing and recruiting firm in central Iowa, Manpower. And I had a lot of people come in through our doors, many of them like you. They had criminal convictions in the background. And I'd sit down and I'd learn their story and I'd realize this is an individual whose life is on a completely new trajectory. I like this gal, or I like this guy. I think they're workforce ready. So I would excitedly call out to our client companies and say, hey, I think I got a good one for you. And then when the subject of criminal convictions would come up, they would say, nah, we're not interested. We have a policy, either written or unwritten, that precludes us from hiring individuals with criminal convictions. So I was always deeply disappointed by that. Or it may be that, yeah, we don't want somebody with a disability. Sounds like too big of a pain for us. We don't have enough resources to adequately supervise. So it began to really weigh on me. Here we had a state where we had thousands of employers stating that they cannot find motivated job seekers. And yet I knew that they had enacted policies that exiled some of our most motivated job seekers in the state from the workforce. Quite a paradox. And I became intent on bridging that gap. So I thought, how can we do it? Well, one weekend I had the idea of packaging up stories of individuals like you who had successfully overcome your barriers to employment, went out, landed jobs, and did a great job. So I began moonlighting nights and weekends to put this thing together, developed a website, raised money for videos, set up a website, brought in nominations. And we had our first Job Honor Awards in June of 2014 in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And the results exceeded my wildest expectations. We had nearly 1,000 business leaders from across the state in the audience. We played 4 honoree videos, and we saw 4 emotional standing ovation from these hardcore business leaders. And I had a guy come up to me yesterday who'd spent his entire career in vocational rehabilitation. Actually, it was David Mitchell, the head of Iowa Voc Rehab. And he used the term game changer. He said, I've never been in a room filled with employers getting excited about the idea of hiring disadvantaged candidates. So that told me we were on to something. And I needed to lift the sails high and get as much impact out of this thing as possible. So at any rate, we've been doing it ever since. As he mentioned in my introduction, we're now in 4 states with plans to be in all 50. But whenever I get a chance to speak in prisons, which is my other big audience, I have the employers and I have prisons, I want to share this information. Next slide, please. While I find my clicker. It's important for all of you to recognize the hiring manager's philosophy, which I've simplified into this. The best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. It's just that simple. I've been a hiring manager. I've hired hundreds of people, and I've terminated scores of people. Now, when you're making a decision about how to hire somebody, it's not what they say they're going to do. It's what they have done. And for the individual who's coming out of prison, you may have some black marks on that past. So obviously that's something that you can and must contend with. And by the way, if this seems unfair, reflect for a moment on the fact that we all do it. If you were searching for somebody that you trusted to watch over something that's precious to you, whether it's your kids, your car, what have you, are you going to hire somebody that talks a good game but has never ever shown up when they said they would show up? Or are you going to hire somebody who has a track record of doing the right thing? Of course you are. All humans are like that, and you're going to be judged by those same criteria. We all want to be judged by our intentions, but unfortunately we are judged by our actions. That's how we judge others. I use this graphic a lot, and it's the convince me that you have changed graphic. Whenever you're talking to a prospective employer or perhaps a prospective landlord, this is the challenge that's in front of you. They see an individual coming out of prison, which is the low part of that line. And what you need to convince them of is that there has been a transition point in your life after which nothing was ever the same. It's that part there in the circle in the bottom. And then you can see the direction of that life changes. That is mission critical. I've sat across the desk from scores of individuals whom I instinctively liked. And that's just the way I'm wired. I'm in their corner. I want them to win. I want to help them find a good job. So they're sharing their story with me, and they're candidly going through the part of their life where it falls apart, where it goes to prison. And I'm patiently waiting, and I'm thinking, okay, please, man, get to the punchline where it all turned around for you. Otherwise, I have nothing left to conclude except your life's going to continue on that same track ad infinitum, and I can't send you out to a client. So I'll wait, and they'll keep talking about it. Then I got the third OWI, did some serious time for that, and then got out, got an arrest, I got the domestic abuse charge, and okay, please, punchline. And then I realized there is no punchline. All we have is a life in ruins. And I realized, man, that's not someone I can recommend to a client. The critical element is, can the individual describe a transformation point in their life after which they left the old life behind? Now, that transformation point can take a variety of forms. My personal bias, spiritual transformation. Absolute, total, top to bottom transformation in that individual's life after nothing was ever the same. But there are other things that can stand in that place. Interim activities, I might say. For example, substance abuse treatment, a 12-step program. You learn new ways of coping with the pain in your life. And you realize that you can cope in ways other than climbing into a whiskey bottle. And that also can change the trajectory of your life. Sometimes it happens spontaneously, though this is very rare. I've actually met individuals who, upon the birth of their first child, for example, they say, you know what? It's time to change. Time to put away childish things and live a new life. And they actually do it, and they stick to it. But whatever it may be, it's got to be that transformation point. Now, some prisoners are formerly incarcerated people, or I like the term of art that's used now, returning citizens, because that emphasizes A, their humanity, and B, their trajectory. So for some returning citizens now, they cannot articulate a transformation point there or an inflection point for a very serious reason. It doesn't exist. That is problematic. Now, you may find jobs out there where it doesn't matter, but I'll shoot straight with you. They're probably crappy jobs. You know, you'll have some potential jobs where the employer won't even care to hear the details. Why? Because you're a body and you can lift heavy objects. And when they've worn you out, they'll grab another. But a good job, they're probably going to care something about trust. And in order to establish that trust, you need to demonstrate to that employer some self-awareness. You know, do you live your life like an insect, moment to moment, and then 10 years of that insect life was in prison, now you're back out moment to moment, how am I going to get high tonight, etc.? Or has there ever been a moment where you stepped away from the graph of your life and analyzed, how did I get where I am? And is this where I want to be? And if it's not, how can I change it? How can I change the trajectory? That's called self-awareness. People respect self-awareness. And they realize that that has an emotional maturity and a wisdom to it that they're not going to get elsewhere. So you can see then after that circled point, we have a life moving in an entirely new direction. And that's what you need to be excited about. You need to be able to articulate a future with good things. And I honestly believe with all my heart that everybody in this room has the capability of accomplishing precisely that. Basically, the best years of your life, your greatest joy, lays ahead of you. I truly believe that. Now, there's things you can do to blow it, but if you let it happen, if you do the right things, man, whatever time you spent here, who cares? Basically, the clock was punched, you learned some incredible lessons, and you can carry those lessons out in a way that will help you to be a great help to your fellow man because you have suffered, and you can share that empathy and that love with your fellow man. Or you can decide to be bitter, which is better. And unfortunately, people decide to be bitter every day. The graveyards are full of people who said, my way, my way. And they go through life, and that downward trend continues forever. They always think something's magically going to turn it around. They'll meet that perfect person, or they'll win the lottery, or that something magical things happen. They're going to land that career as a hip-hop artist, and it doesn't happen, and they're old, and there's the grave, and it's over. So we're all going to be surprised by that one day. The key is going to be, don't assume it's going to happen. You got to make it happen. A phrase that has occurred to me many times in my life doing what I do is, God is not sentimental. If you're hell-bent on wrecking your life, He will let you. Next slide, please. So here's the advice that I always give to the incarcerated. First of all, overcoming the past is a two-step process. Now, most people are going to skip step one. They're going to come in and they're going to say, okay, let's get down to business. Let's work on those resumes. I figure that's a waste of time for most people because step one is you got to change. Whatever patterns of failure put you there behind bars, you need to escape those patterns of failure. And the second order of business is you need to convince a hiring manager that you have changed. Okay, so step one is necessary, but it's not sufficient. Remember me sitting at the desk trying to pull the story out of the person? You're going to be that person. You need to be able to share your story in a convincing way and let them know that you've changed. So, for that, I recommend a personal narrative. The personal narrative has three components. First, acknowledge the old patterns of failure. And you can see the number one there on the left side of that graph. When your life was falling apart, own it. And describe what happened. Well, I was addicted to drugs, and it made me do stupid and increasingly stupid things. Step two, here's the turnaround. Here's what happened in my life that completely transformed my outlook, completely transformed my approach, changed my direction. I walked differently after that. And then step three, present a vision for the future. If you can sit in front of a hiring manager and lay that out, that's going to impress a human being. And I'll take the risk of very quickly giving you an example of that. Two guys, Bob and Robert, who get out of prison on the same day. They have roughly the same offenses. They've each done 3.5 years for drug-related offenses. And Bob has not prepared much for his interview, but Robert truly has. So Bob goes up for his interview first. He meets the hiring manager, Mr. Smith, shakes his hands, walks in, kind of stares at the floor, doesn't really engage much with Mr. Smith, but Mr. Smith notes on his resume the 3.5-year gap where he has no work history. And he says, well, tell me what was going on here. And Bob looks down at his feet and says, well, I was in prison for drug charges. Offers no elaboration. So the interview continues awkwardly. And finally, at the end, Mr. Smith says, hey, well, do you have anything else to add, Bob? And Bob feebly says, well, I'm ready to work. I think this would be a good place for me. Okay, appreciate you coming in, Bob. They shake hands. Bob walks out. And Bob is dejected because he knows it did not go well. Next up is Robert. And Robert is prepared. He walks in, looks Mr. Smith in the eye, shakes his hand, and they sit down. And so they go through the normal niceties, the small talk at the beginning. And then Mr. Smith, the HR manager, jumps to the elephant in the room. He says, hey, Robert, I see here on your resume that you did not work for 3.5 years. What was going on here? Robert looks him in the eye, and he says, I was doing a 3.5-year sentence for drug abuse. And in fact, when you look into my history, Mr. Smith, you'll see that the wheels first started coming off my life about 10 years ago. At that time, I went through a painful divorce with my wife. I began drinking to excess, and eventually the wheels came completely off my life. Moved on to harder drugs, got arrested additional times. By the time I was finally arrested on this latest offense, I got to tell you, it was the most humiliating and painful occurrence in my entire life. But during the time that I was here, I focused myself on learning how to change, how to focus on new ways of dealing with stress and disappointment in my life. And I got to tell you, Mr. Smith, it was absolutely life-changing. I am a new person. I'm not the same guy that's on that paper in front of you. I've absolutely changed. And I'm looking forward to a future where I can make a great contribution in the workforce. I know that whoever hires me is going to have one of the best employees they've ever had. And I will come here every day if you'll give me that chance and make sure that you never, ever regret that decision. Mr. Smith, will you give me that chance? Now, of those two individuals, identical crimes, which one do you think has an opportunity to land that job? The one who was open, he was transparent, he was vulnerable, he laid it out, he acknowledged his crime, he owned it, he described the transformation point, and he described a vision for the future. If you have an opportunity to do that, and if you're in front of a hiring manager that's got a heart, and some of them do, then they might get excited about you and say, you know what, man, there but for the grace of God go I. I want to help this guy. I want to help this gal. I want to give you that first shot to turn your life around. If you can get them on board, excited about your situation, then you've got a shot at entering that company. But you will be disappointed. There's a lot of companies that just have written or unwritten policies, won't touch you with a 10-foot pole. Who cares? Their loss. Shake the dust off your feet and move on to the next opportunity, because the next opportunity awaits you. A lot of people make the mistake. They drop out of the workforce altogether, dragging their past like a ball and chain. Don't do it. The worst words would be nearly made it. You might be stopping short of victory, like the guy swimming a marathon, finally out of gas and quits 20 yards from shore. Stay in there, because you will get that job. And it may be that your first job is a lousy job. Who cares? We can all gut that out for a few months. And then you get the record, the employment record. You can build upon that. It's like, well, you worked that job. That had to be a tough one, man. You were never late. I like it. Let's try you for this next job. So you've got a number of barriers to employment between you and the potential job. Here's what I recommend. See if I can get to it there. Find an advocate. Think of it as a workforce pipeline. You've got you, the disadvantaged job seeker, on the left. You've got workforce development agencies in the middle, and the jobs that can be yours on the right. Now, in that middle part of the equation are a lot of great organizations that can be of immense help to you. Now, if you're wired like a lot of us, you're reluctant to go and get help because you think that's a sign of weakness. Well, I'll tell you this, in the modern era of job searching, it's not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of wisdom. Nearly everyone does it. Because, what you're going to have in the middle part of that equation is an advocate who you pay nothing. And these people often have relationships with the employers. So if you can go in, and it might be a re-entry agency, like Inside Out in Iowa City, Iowa Workforce Development, they have a lot of great programs to help formerly incarcerated, how to improve your resume, how to improve your skills. Hook up with these people because they have relationships with employers. And if you can impress them that you are workforce ready, they will be quick to talk to their employer friends and say, hey, got this guy, Joe Blow, in my class. He's fully engaged, participates every day. He is as workforce ready as he could be. You'd be doing yourself a favor by hiring him. Then on the power of that recommendation, you could land that next job. So find out who these people are in the middle part of the equation and utilize their services. And these are some of the things that a hiring manager will look for. And a lot of them emulate what I already shared. Does the candidate demonstrate self-awareness? That is, do they acknowledge the old patterns of failure? Can they describe their transformation? This is what changed me. Can they present a vision for the future? And do they provide evidence that they pursued self-improvement while in prison? And that last point, obviously, by virtue of the fact that you're here today, you can point to that. And for everyone else, mission critical. Mission critical, because it could spell the difference between a job and not getting a job. I heard recently from an Iowa prison official that the most often prescribed med in the Iowa prison system is sleeping meds. People trying to sleep their time away. And the tragedy there is that could be time that is invested in self-improvement and turning the life around, in doing that transformation in your life. Unique opportunity for that. Please take advantage of that training program, because the day will come when you'll be one of the 95% of the people leaving Iowa's prisons and jails and coming back to a community near me. I want to be able to employ you when you get there. But if all you did is hang out in prison, lift weights and talk, man, that's not exactly priming your skills. So, at any rate, those are several things that I encourage each of you to do. You're obviously on the right path, and by finishing on a strong note, that's really going to strengthen your hand moving on to the next opportunity. I'll close with a very brief story that I sometimes close with. I heard it from a guy from India named Ravi Zacharias, and it really resonates with me. Take it for what it gives you. A little boy had a collection of marbles, and a little girl had a collection of candy. They were brothers and sisters, and they both loved their collections. The girl admired her brother's marbles, and he admired her candy. And one day, they proposed a trade. The little boy said, "Look, I will give you all of my marbles if you'll give me your bag of candy." So the little girl very deeply reflected on that, and she finally determined, okay, you got a deal. So they each return to their rooms to gather them up. The little girl goes, puts all of her candy in a bag. She's all excited about the new marbles that are coming. The little boy goes to his room, begins gathering up his marbles. And as he's gathering them, he picks up a couple of them that are really particularly meaningful to him, real beauties. And the thought occurs to him, you know, if I put these beneath my pillow, she'll never know that I held back these marbles. So he hides those marbles, puts the rest in a bag. They go out and they make the exchange. And the little girl is thrilled. The little boy is troubled. Well, that night they're both in bed. The little girl is sleeping soundly, a smile on her face. But down the hall, her brother tosses and turns, tormented by the question, I wonder if she gave me all the candy. And the lesson there, my friends, is that an unsurrendered will can never know peace, because it's only by laying down your life that you will gain it, only by serving that you will be exalted. And that's a lesson that we all need to bring to heart. So thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure to be with you, and I wish a meaningful life for all of you.